Hello, my name is Lisa Oswald. Thank you for watching my presentation regarding the integrative model. The integrative model was created in response to other approaches that compared all children to the norms of average white children and their performance. Both old and new theories are based on unrealistic stereotypes and distortion of people that have been created over time. Theories tend to imply that people who are not white are not as capable, or that there is something wrong with their ethnic group because it bases its research on white expectations. Theories also tend to focus on maladaptive aspects of different ethnicities and not their strengths. The integrative model identifies how goals, values, and attitudes of a culture affect child development. It takes into account family history and social connections that define, interpret, and adjust children to their environment. Children are in a constant state of evolution in order to protect or promote themselves based on cultural demands. Their changes are based on responses to the need to adapt to society within their environment, by creating an adaptive culture, which refers to how a social culture defines goals, values, and attitudes that differ from the larger social culture. In other words, a smaller group of people create their own cultural norms within a larger social group. An example of this from my own personal experience is that I work in a group of people in Hempstead, and they all go to the same church. And with that church, they are connected with the other people that are like them, and they are doing things for the community, and they meet every Sunday, and this is their cultural norm, and this is what they do, as opposed to like the greater environment that they live in, which, they go to the store, they have social media, they watch TV, and those other environmental aspects that also affect their overall development. The integrative model incorporates Bronfenbrenner's concept of how a child develops, and how it's affected by the child's macrosystem. Bronfenbrenner's theory describes a macrosystem as the larger environment that a child lives in, which affects a child's development, such as social ideologies, norms, and cultural values. One primary focus of the integrative model is to study parenting style, family life, and how families teach their children about their ethnicity, as well as teaching them about how to protect themselves from a diversity within their environment. Parents spend time teaching their children how to deal with discrimination in order to adapt to working with others. In other words, they are taught social and emotional regulation when they are presented with racism. Studies regarding parenting also looks at how parents interact with their children to shape their understanding of their cultural identity. Perez Breno and his colleagues studied African American and Puerto Rican families who have been brought to the United States as slaves, who face challenges of currently as well, of attaining high-paying jobs due to racism, and who are still discriminated against. Many studies contend that there are genetic and environmental deficiencies and a lack of parental involvement in the primary reasons for poor academic performance among African American and Puerto Rican peoples, which is completely inaccurate. The integrative model takes into account how a child's environment affects their development, in that it identifies how racism, social hierarchy, and social inequities affect development. The integrative model also identifies positive aspects of ethnicity, such as a group of people's adaptability and resilience to racism and discrimination. One such integrative study looked at adolescents and their cultural identity, and found that adolescents who felt strongly connected to their ethnicity and had their strong connection to their own ethnic identity were less likely to engage in maladaptive behavior. An example of how integrative model and adaptive culture is seen among ethnic groups is when Mexican American parents teach their children how to respond to discrimination so that the discriminatory behaviors are minimized by others, meaning that people who are discriminating against them may be less discriminatory because they're not acting and behaving the way that the discriminatory thought process expect them to. In other words, again, the stereotypes. They're acting differently than a stereotype of a Mexican American might act. And therefore, they're minimizing the discrimination of these people. Not only that, but other examples would be how South Asian parents try to teach their children what to do, again, in the face of discrimination when the 9/11 attack happened and the parents were trying to teach their children how to respond to negative reactions to them, which is silly and ridiculous. But parents basically were teaching them how to behave, and actually the children felt that the parents were being overreacting to stressors in their environment. So a lot of them did not follow those suggestions the parents came up with. But an example of how integrative model and adaptive culture that is not, my own personal experiences is I work in Hempstead, like I mentioned. Actually, I work in Uniondale, but a lot of the students that I work with come from Hempstead, and they are all African American and of Latino descent. And they are taught very differently how to respond to police officers. Again, they're worried about racism and discrimination. So they're told by their parents how, when the police officers come to them, if they should ever be, arrested or try to be arrested by a police officer, that they automatically going to put their hands up. They speak in a very monotone tone. They don't walk towards the police officer. They stay in one spot. And these are all things that they're taught by their parents in order to keep them safe. Again, it's a proactive skill. It's a protective measure. And this is what the adaptive culture is explaining. This is what they're actually doing. So all studies discuss... I'm sorry, I missed something. The integrative model also takes into account part of Piaget's theory that identifies that children are not passive but actively participate in their learning and development because they purposefully interact with objects and people in their environment. A child's characteristics affect overall development and academic outcomes. Basically, that they are not just sitting there waiting, they're involving, and their characteristics also play a part in their development and their academic performance. All the studies discussed, highlighted in Cole's and Perez-Brena's articles, were brought in their articles because they all identified the importance of family involvement when teaching about ethnicity and how families of different ethnic backgrounds are capable of adapting to their larger environmental stressors due to teaching their children how to deal with racism and how to embrace their heritage. They also show how a child develops a sense of ethnic self and promotes positive protective barriers to counteract the effects of racial discrimination in society. These studies also disprove prior theories that are discriminatory in nature by identifying key values and norms needed for ethnic families to thrive in the United States despite adversity. I think that's the best thing to read it just as it is. The integrative model contributes to a better understanding of people from diverse ethnicities because it centers on positive aspects of their culture and not stereotypes that are negative. It also shows their development in the perspective of their ethnicity, as opposed to comparing them to people who are white and their development and their cultural norms and expectations. And that's very, very important, because in order for people to be seen and not be racially and be discriminated against, we need to see people as who they are, and not all the stereotypes that have been brought about from decades and decades of, again, theories and scientific explanations of genetics and roles and things like that. So I apologize for being a little wordy, and I'm very tired today, but I appreciate you sitting through my presentation, and thank you so much for your time. Have a great night. Thank you.